I'd first like to acknowledge that there's been yet another disaster in New Zealand, and our thoughts are with the people of Auckland tonight who are affected by the tornado. This bill represents three things that this government is becoming renowned for: weakness, cronyism and dodginess. And it's the weakness of this minister in not having any real plan for public broadcasting in this country other than to get rid of it. If he did have a plan, then he's been rolled. He's a weak minister. This legislation is a disgrace, and his approach to public broadcasting is a disgrace, and he's a waste of space. The weakness of the Prime Minister and the ministers, including the Broadcasting Minister, in kowtowing to pressure by corporate media to bail them out while seeing off the important role of public broadcasting. It's cronyism at its worst. TVNZ stripped of its charter, its public interest role. TVNZ 7 axed, our new innovative digital channel gone. While this government hands over a $43 million loan to its corporate mate MediaWorks, which runs TV3 and some influential radio stations, and it's an election year, go figure. Mr Speaker, Labor is emphatically opposed to the TVNZ Amendment Bill. We're opposed to replacing the TVNZ Charter with a statement of functions. We're opposed to this minister instructing TVNZ that they're no longer a public broadcaster. Instead, they're a commercial broadcaster. That was earlier this year, well before this bill has even been enacted, while the Charter was still in force. And let me tell you what TVNZ said on the 7th of April to the Commerce Committee in response to a question from me about whether they believe that Television New Zealand is a commercial broadcaster or a public service broadcaster. The Chair, Rick Ellis, said, "The shareholder, the government, has made it clear that our primary mandate is to be a commercial broadcaster, a commercially successful company. The announcement that the Minister made yesterday with respect to TVNZ 7, I think, gives weight to that. Our primary focus is to be a commercial broadcaster, commercially successful, a successful commercial entity." He said that the Minister had visited the board in March and expressed this view. So TVNZ had been instructed to prioritise commercial functions and hence neglect the Charter, which was well before the Charter has even been abolished, and it hasn't yet been abolished. Instead, the Charter is supposed to be abolished in this bill, and it currently remains in statutory force, which is only going through its second reading today. TVNZ is supposed to be abiding by the Charter, but this government has blatantly disregarded the law as it stands because it's already made the decision to exit. And this raises some very interesting questions about whether the government has acted unlawfully in instructing a Crown company through policy to act in a manner that contravenes its statutory functions. Who was the last Prime Minister to do that? Muldoon, that's who. Who made the decisions that he contravened laws and then changed the law to give his decisions validity. And the legal precedent of Fitzgerald versus Muldoon in the 1970s was a case of the executive assuming the powers of the legislature, powers which he does not have, and that's dodgy. And I'll tell you what else is dodgy. The Minister, Jonathan Coleman, claims that the government did not receive any proposal from TVNZ 7 regarding the possibility of funding TVNZ 6 or 7 with commercial revenues from TV1 and TV2. However, Labor understands that TVNZ did consider this, but because of the demand for increased dividends, it wasn't possible. TVNZ told the Select Committee that they approached the government with a proposal to keep TVNZ 7 going. Jonathan Coleman has denied that. Who's telling the truth? Perhaps the Minister could answer that. We also understand the government was instructing TVNZ to operate, in effect, as a state-owned enterprise and return dividends at a rate of 9%, even though the risk-free rate was apparently only 6.4%. Yet where in the Charter does it say that TVNZ is required to return a dividend of 9%, and that requirement takes precedence over all the other clauses in the Charter? If there is such a clause, I challenge the Minister to read it to the House. And to take the cake, Mr Speaker, We also understand that on one of the many occasions when the Minister, Jonathan Coleman, attended board meetings with MediaWorks, that the future of TVNZ7 was not only discussed, but that a strong message was delivered to him by the board to get rid of it. Given that he subsequently did get rid of it and that MediaWorks were handed a cool $43 million loan to defer payment on their spectrum licences, just how did MediaWorks get to exert so much pressure on this government? Perhaps the Minister would like to answer this. Did he discuss the future of TVNZ7 with the board of MediaWorks? What was the nature of those discussions and what message was delivered to him? Was it a strong message? Was it a get rid of TVNZ7 or else message? He certainly met with the board of MediaWorks on many occasions, 9 times to be precise, between the 9th of December 2008 and the end of last year. Not sure how many times this year, perhaps he could tell us that. Interestingly, he met with the board 6 times last year. That's a lot. What did he discuss? In the meantime, while broadcasting, that's correct, Minister Coleman has been busy meeting with the board of the commercial broadcaster. Public radio broadcasting in New Zealand is in tatters following a statement by the new Radio New Zealand chair, Richard Griffin, that he's going to move our state radio broadcaster towards commercialisation. He says Radio New Zealand won't become a commercial product, but in the next breath revealed he was open to sponsorship of some radio programs at the state broadcaster, even if a law change was needed. He said, "This board has got the will and determination to make it happen, not just to enhance the product, but to enhance the revenue for the product." Richard Griffin, the new chair, is a former press secretary to Jim Bolger, and he denied his appointment was political. But his agenda fits with this government's view to strip our state broadcasters of public broadcasting functions and to turn them towards cost recovery and even profit. And he's been appointed to chair that board after less than a year. What does this all tell us? And what does this bill that's being put before the House today tell us? That there is a crisis in public broadcasting in New Zealand. Yes. Recently, as the Minister has just helpfully told us, more than 60 academics in New Zealand wrote an open letter of concern to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Broadcasting, the Minister of Communications and Information Technology, and the Minister of Finance. They expressed deep concern about the closure of TVNZ7. They said this was one more in a series of steps by the government to dismantle the little that is left of public broadcasting in our country. Public service television is even more important in a country of limited size, they said. Our small population means that New Zealand's commercialised television channels simply cannot provide the range of programming that viewers want and should be able to access in the interests of democracy as well as cultural identity. They also said in radio, New Zealand has a national public service network, Radio New Zealand, and publicly funded Māori radio stations. In television, it has 2 publicly funded Māori channels, Māori TV and Te Reo, which are performing an important function, but there is no national television service equivalent to Radio New Zealand. So while I'm at it, here's a few more questions for the Minister today. What's his response to the claims by these academics that most OECD countries have at least one public service television channel, simply because they understand the market will never fulfil this role, and without it, the potential of television to create a better informed society and a stronger democracy will never be realised? There is, as far as I can discover, one other country in the OECD that doesn't have a public service television channel other than New Zealand, and that's Mexico. And now New Zealand has joined that, and that is shameful. Last week, Labor called on the nation's top thinkers, as the Minister has helpfully said, the business leaders, politicians, academics and senior media industry figures to converge to discuss the future of public broadcasting and media in New Zealand. And I repeat that call today, and it's my understanding that it's getting a good reception. There is a lot of people out there who care about public broadcasting in New Zealand. That Minister is not one of them. Our ability to tell stories, to provide the public with independent critical analysis, reporting and investigation, not owned by corporate interests. Every democracy in the world has it. Every nation should have it. We're losing ours.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to stand and support this.